Greetings, this is Charles Darwin again, and I'm going to continue talking to you about the Bible on the Darwin and the Bible channel, which is separate from the Darwin channel, which discusses mostly science, as most of you already know. I've already posted videos about the book of Genesis, and now we're ready to make a transition into the second book of the Old Testament, the book of Exodus. But before I do so, I wanted to point out a general theme or idea that seems to be found in both books, especially in the book of Genesis. Now, when I was a young Cub Scout back in junior high school, I was chosen during a campout to give the Sunday morning sermon. And the verse that I chose was the one from the book of Matthew, where Jesus talked about how you should choose the narrow way, the narrow path. Not the wide road that leads to destruction, but the narrow path. And of course, us Boy Scouts did a lot of walking on narrow paths. And I was trying to say that according to the New Testament, that was the right way to go. Rather than to seek the easy path that leads to fatness and laziness and destruction, you choose the narrow path of accomplishment and of efficiency. Well, this is not a new idea. That wasn't something that could be found only in the New Testament, but rather pervades the book of Genesis. And I'm doing this to try to illustrate to you some of the major ideas of these books, rather than to get hampered down by arguing about whether the literal interpretation is correct or not. That's not the point. The point is, are there any big ideas that we might be able to learn from? And this is one of them. That even back as far as the time of Abraham, according to the book of Genesis, the choice that was the right choice, the good choice, was the choice of the harder way rather than the easier way. This was Abram's choice. When there was a choice that was between the low-lying valleys that were agricultural and rich and productive, or the hillsides with the stubby vegetation and the stubby grasses upon which you could only herd sheep, Lot, the relative of Abram, chose the agricultural land, wouldn't you? That would seem to be the rich land, whereas Abram chose the hillsides, where the living was going to be rough and tricky and difficult. As it turns out, however, that the choice that Lot made led him into evil, and there were lots of consequences of that. And that's where the cities that the Old Testament consistently portrays as being evil, the Assyrian cities, the Babylonian cities, were in the agricultural plains. And that's where evil was found. But righteousness was to be found up in the hills, in the Spartan lifestyle of herding sheep. It was down in the agricultural valleys. That's where the Tower of Babel was, in Babylon. And that this was also portrayed as evil. This goes back even as far as Cain and Abel, two of the sons of Adam, according to the stories of Genesis. Cain chose agriculture. He chose to raise crops. He was already choosing on the side that would eventually become Babylon and Assyria. Whereas Abel chose to herd the sheep up in the hills. Even as far back as the beginning of human race, the way it's portrayed in the book of Genesis, there was this choice between the soft, lazy, evil lifestyle. Of course, farm work can be very hard, but you see what they did was they had slaves do the hard work. And that was even a further evil. You will see this as we start to get into the book of Exodus and Egypt. According to this book, the Egyptian rulers made slaves out of the Israelites. And that this choice of the easy lifestyle of living in Egypt, where a flood each year brought new topsoil so that every year you could have a good crop of food, that resulted in evil people who enslaved the Israelites. To this day, we have the choice. Are we going to take the easy way of continuing to eat a lot of food and to buy a lot of luxuries, and therefore result in more carbon contamination of our atmosphere and more global warming? And a lot of the choices that we make in the way we spend our money is actually making the poor people of the world poorer. Not just through the choices that we make and what we buy, but indirectly through causing more global warming, which is going to disproportionately hit Africa, for example. We still have this choice before us. Do we choose the more Spartan lifestyle, eating less, exercising more, walking more, driving smaller cars, or do we choose the easy lifestyle of using a lot of gasoline, using a lot of energy, and contributing to global warming? That choice, the choice between Abram and Lot, the choice between Cain and Abel, is still with us today. And I think that is an important story to take away. Never mind arguing about literal interpretations. Let's look at the big picture, and we still have something to learn today. This is Charles Darwin telling you, and